Welcome to TMZ Live. We have a documentary coming out tomorrow night on Fox on Nick Reiner and the murder of his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner. And we have learned a lot. One of the most important things we've learned is that around 6 years before Nick
6 years ago.
6 years ago, Nick was diagnosed with a mental illness called schizoaffective disorder, which results in hallucinations, delusions. Also, there are mood disorders like mania.
Severe depression.
Yeah.
Also part of it, yeah.
And that he was being treated for that. He got a drug that stabilized that mental illness.
Or a cocktail of drugs.
Yes.
And he was doing well until a month before the murders.
A month before the murders, we are told doctors changed his meds. And that's when he started going off the rails.
Very alarming behavior. Even the word dangerous was used, that he was dangerous. And his parents were aware of this. They were watching this happen, and they really just didn't know what to do about it at that point.
Now, full disclosure, we have asked our sources, why did they change the meds if the meds were working? The answer we got back was, we can't tell you that right now. But when you find out what it is, you are going to be shocked, saying there is no justification for it in their view, and that it defies logic, and it's not something you could guess. So that's what we are left with. But the bottom line is that they changed his meds. We are told he went off the rails, that they never tried to get him in a psychiatric facility during that month. And that is why when Alan Jackson, his former lawyer, went before the media after the hearing yesterday, after he withdrew from the case, he said Nick Reiner will be found not guilty by a jury. And
pursuant to California laws.
And the code for that is not guilty by reason of insanity. And that directly connects to the change of his meds for schizoaffective disorder a month before he killed Rob and Michelle.
Right. So joining us now to talk more about schizoaffective disorder, how it's treated, and what happens when medications are changed, is Dr. Drew, who we are very fortunate to have his expertise on this. Dr. Drew, welcome back to TMZ Live.
Gentlemen, always a privilege. Unfortunately, it's too often under tragic circumstances like this. But let me just say, schizoaffective fits. Schizoaffective is not necessarily progressive the way schizophrenia is, but it has some of the same symptomatology. They can appear odd. They can be socially completely sort of not perceiving things normally. They can become delusional. They can hallucinate. They can have severe mood disturbances. But there's a feature to schizoaffective. In fact, it used to be almost considered a personality disorder. And it's an extremely unpleasant condition to be around. And it's extremely unpleasant for the patients. So, Harvey, you said we can't guess why he came off the meds.
I can't. I
I'm
can't.
going to guess. Yeah, I'm going to guess a couple things. Because people with psychotic disorders commonly either stop their meds or refuse to take their meds or manipulate their psychiatrist into changing because of a variety of symptoms, some of them quite legitimate. It's very unpleasant sometimes to be sort of pushed down with these antipsychotic medication. And we're always, as clinicians, trying to find something that controls the symptoms but doesn't make them miserable. I mean, it might have been a reasonable move. It was the wrong move, it turned out, but it might have been reasonable at the time.
Wait a minute, you're insinuating that you have some theories on why a doctor would change those meds if they had been working.
It's very common for the patient to come in and go, I don't like how I feel. I can't get an erection. I'm gaining weight. There's a lot of reasons. I feel blunted. I feel better when they don't like how they feel on these medications. They'd rather be not necessarily psychotic, but not in the condition they're in. And unfortunately, there's oftentimes for some patients, no perfect zone to get them in. And I'm very sympathetic to people trying to get there because we want to help the patients.
I get that part of it, Drew, that you want to help the patient, and the patient comes in and says, this isn't working for me. But at the point where doctors or people around the patient are seeing behavior that, as in this case, which we heard was alarming, dangerous. Does it not become beholden upon the physician to say this person should be in a facility?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, in California, you can't do that. So I'm going to blame the state of California for how things actually played
Well,
out.
wait a minute, wait. As a psychiatrist, you can try to get them on at least a psychiatric hold, which could last up to 14 days, and at least
Correct.
then stabilize the person.
It's very, first of all, gravely disabled, which is the primary reason people used to be on holds, doesn't really exist anymore. It's now either actively suicidal or actively homicidal. And if somebody says, I want to kill myself, and you put them in the hospital, they go, I was just kidding. You have to let them out. The state is absolutely egregious in terms of how it allows us to help these people. Now, we don't know what they tried or attempted. We don't know whether Nick refused to go in. We just don't know what happened there. Clearly, it was wrong, incorrect, not to hospitalize him, to get him stabilized. But it may have been the law and the patient that conspired against that.
Amanda Bynes was involuntarily held, I believe it was for a couple of weeks. So I remember cases where it has happened.
It happens. It does happen, but it's when people are severely ill. Look, it happened to Britney Spears, right?
Twice.
When so what happens after 3 days, if you can keep them in for 3 days, which is, again, very difficult in this state, a judge literally comes into the patient room and has a hearing to decide whether the patient's sick enough to stay longer. And in this state, if you don't get the right judge, they're very liberal with sending people back out. There's a lot of a sort of bias in the law that takes the position, who are you to say? Literally, I heard somebody say 2 days ago, if they're psychotic, they're happier, so why don't we leave them psychotic?
Oh.
Literally. So that's the state we live in here in California.
So do you think...
Well, can I just say, that's interesting, because remember, Alan said, under the laws of the state of California.
Right, so I would say, if that's the case, Drew, then it seems like it would make it that much more difficult to get an acquittal by reason of insanity.
No, I disagree. I think that the patient's lack of participation is part of their illness. And unfortunately, the law privileges the resistance and the lack of insight. And that's not the patient's fault. The patient is ill. The patient is sick. It's what didn't happen to and for the patient that ends up where we end up here. And look, there's a lot of blame to go around. It's very easy to look back as an armchair quarterback and call balls and strikes, and there was a lot of problems here. But we don't know all the phenomenon that conspired against poor Nick.
I want to ask you something different. And we talk about this a little bit in the documentary. This is an almost impossible thing, I think, for the family, for the Reiner family to process, that they are grieving the loss of their parents who died in a brutal, horrific way.
Yes.
And at the same time are watching their own flesh and blood on trial, knowing about his mental illness and the struggles that he and his parents went through to try and get him better. I mean, processing those emotions seems Herculean.
Indeed, it is. It requires a lot of talking and a lot of time. Grief is a horrible emotion that humans go to great lengths to avoid. But in situations like this that I have been involved with, where particularly, specifically, when a child kills a parent in a psychotic state, yes, angry, outrage, grief, all those feelings you expect. But what I have witnessed oftentimes is remarkable resiliency and forgiveness, because the patient was sick. They come to understand that my brother would not do this. He was ill and he didn't get the right treatment. Still painful, still grieving, still angry, but there comes to a level of forgiveness I've seen repeatedly that always surprises me.
Okay. Drew, we love having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And by the way, our documentary, TMZ Investigates the Reiner Murders, What Really Happened. It airs Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern and Pacific, 7 Central on Fox, and the next day, Saturday, it drops on HULU.